Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about 3.27 Keepers of the Flame League. Now this will be my usual end of the league thoughts video where I go over everything I liked, everything I disliked, and where I think Path of Exile 1 is currently at. And yes, I know this one's a little bit earlier than usual, but that's because Path of Exile 2 is right around the corner. This time around, they have really weird time management, obviously because of Christmas release and whatnot. But back on track, 3.27 Keepers of the Flame had a complete Breach rework. It also had wand reworks, it added async trade, it added new Foulborn items, Bloodline ascendancies, Scarab nerfs, assassin reworks, Grafts. It really sounds like a lot, but when you actually start playing, it does feel a little bit like a maintenance league, and that's how I feel about this league in general. And that kind of summarized my feelings pretty well. I know a lot of people dislike the league, but I don't really have any feelings either way, which might be in some cases even a worse thing. Overall, the league started out really well early on with a lot of power creep, a lot of upfront power, a lot of things to do, and then it tapered up towards the end. It kind of felt like at times that they didn't have enough time to fully complete it, and that's almost annoying because it feels like a little bit of extra work and it could have been an A to S tier league. However, these are my overall thoughts on Breach League, and then I'll go over, I don't know, Foulborn items, Breach tree, character balance, Bloodlines, yada yada yada. The first 3 days of the league, I really enjoyed, like very little leagues before. It was a lot of upfront power creep if you engaged with the league mechanic early. So all the people who rush can still rush, but all the people who want to engage with the league mechanic from level 20 or even earlier onwards got rewarded quite with stuff like, for example, 6 link chests or certain Grafts that completely carry your damage until like red maps. Also great was async trade, which got tested first in Path of Exile 2 and now got swapped over to Path of Exile 1. And who would have thought? It is great. I will say that as a build maker, it's a lot more annoying if you want to share your builds and everything can be bought up in a split second, or you look at trade on stream and something gets sniped right before you can even click on the trade button. But those are very specific problems. Overall, async trade, I hope it never goes away. It is just, yeah, an absolute treat. And then we've had Foulborn items, which just added 346 new uniques to the game. Basically, we don't really know how many are going to stay, but there is a ton of new items to explore here, and I think we've only really scratched the surface here for what this will do. And if they stay in the main game, which I do think they will, probably not all of them though, then some of them will also get adjusted over time. And these Foulborn items range from good progression items like Foulborn Kikazaru, which has been an absolute blessing to get for some of the early to mid game setups for mana stackers. You have just generally insane stuff like Foulborn Headhunter or Foulborn Unnatural Instinct that are just upgraded versions of items that already exist. And you'll also have just new build around items like, for example, Foulborn Hand of Wisdom in action. You have power creep items like getting Legacy Explodey from a double Foulborn Barracks Respite. An absolute treat, in my opinion, to have them stay in the main game. I really hope that they will be there in other leagues that are maybe a little bit more fleshed out. Maybe we have a little bit more time and PoE2 is not coming in the way immediately. I wish there was, I just wish there was a little bit more time. There's a ton of trash in there. I don't necessarily think they have to remove it, but if they want to, then that would fulfill not having too much bloat. Otherwise, they could adjust it numerically. An absolute treat to have them stay in the main game, and hopefully we'll be able to experience them in a league that's maybe a little bit more fleshed out, and we have a little bit more time between PoE1 and PoE2. In terms of how you could implement them, I think the first one here is the most pragmatic. Breach is going into the base game. There's going to be Scarabs, and you could just make it so there's a base chance for Foulborn items to just drop from Breaches, or maybe only from the Hives from the treasure chest. It's possible. But then you also have a Scarab where you specialize in it, kind of akin to, I mean, there's a few of these Scarabs, but something that's just very specific towards unique farming. You could say 500% chance, more chance for uniques to be Foulborn, or more chance for Foulborn uniques, whatever you want, and then keep the boss fight in the game. I don't think that's too much of an issue, and have them drop a lot of them. There's other possibilities. You could make Foulborn reliquary keys that only drop in Breach content, and yeah, you just go in and you open, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 chests in there and it drops a random Foulborn unique. This would only really work if they delete a lot of the shitty ones, otherwise everything would be quite expensive. Or how about they add a new currency for Foulborn items that's kind of like a Val Orb chance or Tainted Mythic Orb, right? Anything like that where it's like a 50-50 chance, either it deletes the item or it makes it into a corrupted version. The only downside would be that a lot of the items would be nerfed, because then they would already be corrupted vanilla and you couldn't also get corrupted implicits. Or you could add a Foulborn Nameless Seer called It That Gives. probably the best version. Then we have the Breach tree, which is where one of my biggest negative feedback starts, which is a lot of delayed rewards when you're mapping. And this is what one of my biggest gripes with the league comes from: delayed rewards. And that's a big one. If you think about the leagues that people love, it is mostly Tink heavy, right? It's like divines, currency, returns. And if we look at league retention, we can clearly see that Keepers is almost as bad as Necropolis, and Necropolis was like bad. So in that sense, Affliction, whatever you think about MF metas, people like to drop stuff. It's not really about how much you can buy, because in those leagues, everything will be super inflated because everybody makes a lot of money, right? It's more about perceived rewards. And I gotta say, those are absent this patch. They did try and buff the loot inside maps a little bit, but they should have shifted that a lot more. And this is why I'm also looking forward to the Scarabs next patch, because I don't think this tree is going to stay ever. There's no way I think this tree will stay, which will mean they will put the rewards back into the map. Which, looking at the tree, what is really the problem? I think the main issue is steady returns, steady Tinks, big rewards, right? Or whatever you want to call it, which should be fixed by lavish womb gifts, which give you currency. But these nodes are so bad, this is so weak, that you're not really getting that ever. Like, if you're using up 20,000 Graft Blood, in my personal experience, you're getting like 1 Divine or like 1 Foulborn Exalted Orb. We also have the often teased mysterious item womb, which is nothing more than you just converting to whatever other wombs you want. So you can kind of just pick your own rewards, which is not all that exciting, at least not from what they teased in the reveal. And yes, if you know what you're doing and you're very aware of the meta, you can make a lot of money with provisioning womb gifts here. You can have really good fractures. You can have good meta items. You can go for quality Twilight Regalias, whatever you want. There's a million things you can do depending on when you do it. But it also just didn't feel that exciting. The only one I really enjoyed were ancient womb gifts for the unique items. First up, because you could fish for certain unique Foulborn items that were meta at certain points and make pretty good money, and also because later they added a better Foulborn Headhunter and a Foulborn Mage Blood, so going for belts was incredibly fun here, and I actually did get 2 hits. But this is where we get into the main problem with Breach as a whole, and it is kind of like 2 things that play into each other. The first one is that Graft Blood didn't scale well with map juice, so making your maps juicier and harder does not really give you any reward. The league mechanic is very much for Alch and Go playstyles. And while I certainly don't mind that, if your whole league mechanic revolves around that, you have a weird dynamic of your Scarab scaling versus league mechanic scaling. It doesn't really feed into each other. And that's especially an issue because in other leagues, you just ignore the league mechanic and you just say, oh, I'm just going to juice regardless, and I'm just going to not run Breach, or I'm only going to run the efficient ones. But they also nerfed Scarabs quite a bit this patch. So some of the most juicy strats from last league have been absolutely eviscerated. Blight is still there and there's some Legion shenanigans, but we got Risk nerf, Evolution nerf, Abyss Edifice nerf, which was a huge one, and also Titanic getting pretty demolished from all sides. And I think that you could look at these and say, yeah, that makes sense, but there has to be a replacement for it. And especially in a maintenance league like this, where there's not that much replacement, it sticks out. I would have loved if they removed those either over time and replaced them with new stuff, which is usually what happens, right? You have top tier strats that come and go, other than strong boxes, obviously. But yeah, that didn't really happen. It just went away. If they did this in a league like, for example, Affliction, not that many people would notice, but in a league like this, where the exact problem with the league is that end game that they're trying to replace, then here we are. As for Grafts, I feel like this is your run-of-the-mill power creep of the league that will be completely removed once the league is over. We don't really need more extra items in the core game, kind of like relics in the past or charms. And I don't have crazy feelings towards them otherwise. I like the corruptions, but that's just, once again, more stat stacking stuff. Yeah, it was fun, especially early on, gave you a big power boost. I like the idea that it doesn't scale with your character, so it helps badly, like weak characters more than strong characters, which makes sense. The crafting, I think, could have been a little bit better. But that's round about it. What I have written here: interesting early game power creep with some stats will be removed. Yeah, that's about my feeling. And then we have Bloodlines, which are extra ascendancies that you can get from completing certain bosses. You can only take one, and you can yeah, swap out your ascendancy points for points in here. And Bloodlines I really liked, and I thought they had a good impact on the game. Their purpose is, I would assume, to close the gap between good and bad ascendancies. You have certain ascendancies, like for example, Slayer or Elementalist, where clicking for ascendancy points is always going to be efficient. But then you have others that have certain nodes that you want to take, but you're like, it's not quite there, right? Like Chieftain, Gladiator, a lot of those. And for that, I think they did what they're supposed to do. And these are really hard to balance because they will stay in the main game, as far as we understand, for a long time. So they can't just make ascendancies that are strictly better than anything else, because then everybody would take that on every build and it would diminish build diversity. It would also do something that is not often talked about, which is kind of like flavor, right, of your ascendancy. Those are also things that devs always have to think about. And you've had outliers here like Farul, which got played quite a bit because it has just vanilla good nodes, Hunt Leader, and then Farul's Will with certain Specters. And some of the other ones are just very niche, and yeah, they won't be played immediately, but maybe in the future. There's certain ones like the Ward ones, which hinge on Energy Shield actually being like balanced correctly. Otherwise, Ward just doesn't really make any sense. You have exciting ones like +1 ring slot with some crazy downside, which still gets played because of how crazy helical rings are. And yeah, even though they will have to adjust some of the numbers on some of the weaker ones, I think they added a good chunk of character and ascendancy diversity to the game. Talking about character balance though, we've had the wand rework next, which can either be whenever something is reworked that is either scary or exciting, depending on if we get something like the melee rework, which was very positive, or the bow rework, which maybe not so much. But overall, I think it's a win for blasters. A lot of people love Kinetic Blast. Kinetic Blast of clustering is fun. They added Kinetic Fusillade, which is definitely a skill that can be explored in the future. Kinetic Rain got kind of nerfed, but who knows what happens to it in the future. It's kind of mid. We've had new base types, for example, the Kinetic Wand that is now used in a lot of endgame attack-based wand builds, which has cannot roll caster modifiers. I personally would have liked it more akin to daggers, where that doesn't eat up your implicit, but I think it's a good solution either way. Overall, though, it was a good rework. It was pretty inoffensive. There wasn't that much done. They added a few extra skills. I think that they just fleshed out once as an archetype overall, instead of it just being KB. Although some of the skills still need quite a bit of help if you ever want to see them get played. Then we've had the Assassin rework, which I've talked about my feelings toward it already. I think it is an overall weak rework, not the best rework, but it can be salvaged overall. Looking at it, I love that they added infused toxins. It gives extra flavor to the ascendancy. I just do not like how they want to combine crit and poison as kind of a theme. I don't understand why it couldn't be separated. Like we have a lot of ascendancies where stuff is separated, right? Like separate ailments, cold chaos. The main issue is just how bad Perfect Agony is right now for most poison archetypes. You just don't have the points to click for damage that this kind of archetype would require, and a lot of the synergistic nodes with crit poison don't even work with it because the dot multi actually gets overwritten by the crit multi, so you can't even take stuff like Dire Torment or the medium cluster notable. And I just don't know how I should feel about this, because if they make Perfect Agony too good, now it's required, and now that also means if Assassin is too strong for Perfect Agony, now Assassin is required, and we're getting away from actually having a choice. So I don't know what the solution is. I personally would just like them to stop this crit poison archetype, but we'll see. Overall, these are the most inoffensive nodes. They're definitely a good change because the node was already in Ruthless, right? Shadowed Blood, I don't really understand. The way I see that node, other than reflecting ailments back to you, the 40 fizz damage recouped his life is just kind of a weird random stat. The way I see the node is very similar to a Born in the Shadows, something you just throw, a 2-pointer you throw onto an Ascendancy to give you a little bit of extra defensive option in an otherwise squishy archetype. And here's where I would have liked anything actionable that gives defenses. Now, that could be anything. Thematically, maybe give less physical and chaos damage taken to it instead of the recoup. I don't know what the right number would be, maybe 10% or so. Because I do think the unaffected by damaging ailments is interesting and you can do stuff with it, but pack a little bit of extra on top. I would have said Fizz taken as chaos, but then you're just giving people more CI bait, right? Which I don't think is the right way to go about it. I also think that Unstable Infusion is an unfinished node, and it was already bad before. If you remember, it was even worse, quote unquote, basically the same, right? Other than the percentage chance. But after that, you had Power Charge scaling. So the node kind of made sense with that. Even then, I didn't love it too much. But now it is just what does it do here? There is no power charge scaling anymore on Assassin, and getting power charge generation is one of the easiest ones ever, whether it's through Mana Forged Arrows, Spell Slinger, like any sort of power charge on crit you get anywhere, Assassin's Mark. I think this node either needs a line like crit multi per power charge, or you just completely rework it and get away from that power charge kind of theme. You do already have a cultist that has the power charge theme, so it's not necessarily something you have to keep, but if you want to keep it, some extra spice. Stuff like Mystical Infusion is interesting, but if you have to path 4 nodes there and your first node sucks and gives you basically 50 crit, then that's an issue. And then Death Marked, I don't know what to say about it because I don't know where they're coming from with this node. It's just so random. It's like a Freesia notable almost. But overall, these small changes that I talked about would go a long way. I don't think Assassin is that far off. Not as far off as the percentage of play rate would suggest anyways. This is often the case with certain ascendancies. You've seen that also with Occultist, which got 75% energy shield here if you're spell block capped, and all of a sudden, like, Occultist gets a lot more. Like, often it needs less than you would think, is what I'm saying. Especially with Assassination style here, you can pick for the Jugular or Knife in the Back, and then get the other one on Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh, for a total of just always up, 100% more crit, 100% crit multi, and call. So there are pockets here that are really usable. Infused Toxins is usable. Opportunistic is pretty good. Mistwalker is very decent. So that's what I'm really hoping to see next patch. I don't think they have to do another rework. I think their direction is interesting. Just give it a little bit more here or there. And then we have the Spell Suppress nerf, which meant that this patch, if you were Spell Suppress capped like you were last league, you would take 25% increased spell damage, which is a pretty big nerf. But from what I gleaned from their explanation, they wanted it so that builds that aren't really on the right side could make too much use of Spell Suppress, because a lot of the right side builds are certainly not in any danger of being too tanky. So it's usually builds that are not evasion based or not anywhere near here. Usually they are not using a quiver, let's say. And in theory, I like the idea, but I think it was badly executed. What they should have done instead is make Suppress a little bit more scalable. So like effects like +% of suppressed spell damage are a pretty big deal. These could have been buffed across the board. There could have been an extra wheel here so that builds that want and are willing to invest into Spell Suppress can actually come out better than they were last patch, and the builds that just slapped on 100% or just got it for free from like Mage Bane, some attribute stackers, right, or tri-stackers, those builds fall a little bit more flat. I think Invet Rate is fine. This Mastery could have been 5%. With the effectiveness going down to 40%, the 3% relatively is now weaker than it was before. There could have been a cluster, I don't know where, somewhere here, where you would only take it if you're like a bull character or a attack-based, I don't know, character in this region, maybe a ranger, maybe a shadow. Yes, it would have made sense to give us a little bit more scaling there. Just straight up nerfing these builds, I think, was completely useless, especially because, so let's talk about ranger real quick. So I just threw this one in a little bit as a curveball, but I really hate what they did with Bark Skin in general, because I don't understand why Warden can't be a little bit more of an all-rounder. They definitely wanted it to be. This is the only super obvious defensive node, other than obviously some of the Flask shenanigans. But early on, this could be something that Rangers can take to not be ultra squishy and then maybe transition later into their Deadeye once they have gear, but it just isn't. Bark Skin just falls flat, and Lessons of the Season is just bad. These nodes are not really good, and if they were, it would help out a lot of archetypes. That's all I'm saying. So I kind of put this on the bottom here, but overall, I think Nerf Suppress is fine. Give it a little bit of extra scaling. But as I said at the beginning, this did feel like a not quite fleshed out league. It felt like the first few days were extremely fun, and then it kind of tapered off, and there wasn't really much after that. They did add new Foulborn Uniques later on, which I did appreciate, but it didn't solve the certain farming issues, right? We did have async trade, big deal. Foulborn items I love. I hope they stay in the game. EXP overall, I've never actually leveled my league starter to 100 because I would usually respec earlier. It felt free this patch. And what I didn't note too much in the video is how good the league was for a lot of SSF players. So you've had, I mean, people told me this all the time, you should just go SSF if you don't enjoy the league anymore, just go SSF. I understand that. I don't have that perspective, but I obviously get what this Breach tree would add, and for that, it's Great. And yeah, I think that Breach should have been more rewarding inside the map itself. The delayed gratification or whatever with Graft Blood didn't really work out all that well. It was a little bit too delayed. Percentage-wise, this should have been a little bit different. And the Scarab nerfs did not help. It kind of left a hole in the game. Also, I wrote down I didn't like walls. I didn't really understand why walls had to be in there, but sure. Didn't really seem fully fleshed out. Pedal buffs, obviously soon. 16.5s maybe need a little bit of fleshing out there, and the assassin rework I didn't like too much. But that's about all I got for the league. I don't have the kind of hatred that a lot of people have for this league. I've seen some people being very extreme, like worst league ever and whatnot. It's more indifference for me. I don't dislike this league anywhere near some of the other non-favorites for me, like, for example, Calandra or Necropolis. What else? Bestiary. I think this was a mid or below mid league that was unfortunately not fleshed out enough. Yeah, PoE 2 is out and is going to be right around the corner, right, in like 2 weeks from now. So probably also has to do with that. I did enjoy the builds that I played. I did enjoy my time of playing. It didn't feel like I wanted to play as much as I usually do. That's about it. It didn't diminish the quality of the gameplay that I had. But yeah, with that extremely fence-sittery take out of the way, let's see what PoE 2 has in store next. It's going to be out in 2 weeks. I really hope that they can add a little bit to the momentum. They did say they're going to rework the end game. They did remove towers. They had what I think is the best league mechanic yet with the reworked Abyss. And yeah, if you have different takes, put them down in the comments. I know these kind of discussions are usually the most heated ones. I wish I had a more extreme and more pronounced take, but this league, I just didn't have that energy in either direction. And yeah, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.